When playlists stop holding videos and start holding context. Question 1. When does a playlist stop being a container and start becoming infrastructure? When does a playlist stop being a place where I save videos and becomes a structure through which I route attention? Listen, most people understand playlists as containers. They hold videos. End of story. But in playlist theory, playlists do more than hold content. They preserve context. They route attention. They differentiate urgency. They separate temporal memory from categorical memory. They allow a content consumer to return to their own consumed digest with more intelligence than raw watch history could ever offer. So how do I explain that shift clearly? A playlist is not just where the video goes. It is where the reasoning for saving the video becomes recoverable. Let that breathe. A playlist is where the reason for saving the video becomes recoverable. So what is the difference between saving a video and routing a video? Routing means you already have categories instantiated. You already understand the difference between a category-specific quick pick and an ASAP quick pick. Quick pick is our branded term. You can adopt it as curatorial technique, or you can build your own synonym to anchor your playlists for search engine optimization, right? You can use it as your own curatorial technique, or you can build your own synonym to anchor your own playlists for search engine optimization. That is the kind of technique we offer to content curators. As a content consumer, you can use Quick Pick if you want. Quick Pick was originally just internal scaffolding so that our other people searching for playlists could find them by searching for Quick Pick playlists. Now, what's the actual difference between routing a video and saving one? When you route, you already have the end goal in mind. The video is going into a specific category. It's going into a bucket for a temporal reason. It is going into a bucket for as soon as possible reason. It is being routed through the cybernetic ecology, through the YouTube hypergraph, through the trained capacity of your mind to project a stable bucket as a reflection of your intention. You are filling a bucket inside the cybernetic ecology. You are creating a title that represents an instantiated category. That category becomes a routing vector. This is why it's different from saving a video. You save a video to your watch history just by watching it. You save a video to your watch later by clicking the 3 dots and tapping Save to Watch Later. And you save a video to your liked videos by tapping Like. 3 modern alternatives to routing. All 3 of them are piles. None of them are infrastructure. And that is the origin of playlist technique itself. Playlist technique began as the move away from using watch later, liked videos, and watch history sorted by date added if they were playlists, as if they were playlists, as if those 3 forms of curatorial origin technique, just the watch later playlist, the watch later bucket, the liked videos, the watch history bucket, right? As if they were playlists. So what's the difference between a playlist and a pile? Well, remember, it begins with a title. It begins with a naming schema. It begins with the scaffolding. So you could title every playlist with a numbering schema and nothing else. Playlist 1, playlist 2, playlist 3, playlist 4. And then you'd be forced to ask, what does that even mean? What am I doing with a numbering scheme? I do use a system like that, but for a specific purpose. For our category-specific quick picks, I instantiate one anchor playlist starting at 1, and then I keep the playlist as a continuation by adding a secondary number in parentheses. So it becomes culture commentary, parentheses 1, culture commentary, parentheses 2, culture commentary, parentheses 3, culture commentary, parentheses 4, and so on, as I filled the bucket for that category. Why? Because of an interface constraint. When the bucket fills past around 400 videos, it becomes almost unnavigable on mobile. So we cap our category-specific playlists at around 400 videos and continue the same category in the next iteration. That is the difference between a playlist and a pile. It begins with the title. It begins with the naming schema. So what does an ASAP playlist actually remember? An ASAP playlist remembers your temporal field of reference. It remembers what you wanted to consume as soon as possible inside a given window of time. I am here. I want to consume this right now. Why? Because in this moment, it matters. And you can cross-reference that memory by toggling the sort order inside the playlist. Change the sort from date added to date published to most popular. That gives you 3 different readings of the same bucket. Date added gives you the stratigraphy of your own decision train. What you added first, second, third, fourth in linear sequence. That is your own attention sequence preserved. Date published gives you publishing stratigraphy. What creators released into the cybernetic ecology, in what order. If a breakout news story drops, you can easily see early game coverage, mid-game analysis, and end-game essays from the synthesizers and video essayists who finally publish well-thought-out content after the breaking news cycle has settled. Most popular gives you a reading of the hypergraph itself. What is the cybernetic ecology valuing? What is the collective consciousness valuing? Not what we think they should value, what they are actually valuing, expressed through view counts. That is what an ASAP quick pick remembers. A category-specific playlist remembers something different. It remembers a specific category, a specific frame of reference, a formal instantiation. We use parenthesized numbering schema. AI culture commentary, parenthesis was 1. AI culture commentary, parentheses 2. We are up to AI culture commentary, parentheses 3. The category itself becomes a forward lateral productive bucket that you can progress through across time as a formal category instantiation. Now here is where I have to be about what we're actually running up against. A temporal playlist properly funded, fully instantiated is a 6th playlist quarterly archive. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and the weekend. That is 5 days plus the weekend. 6 playlists, 3 months of subscription box content bundled across them. That is what makes it a temporal playlist. We are not currently running that architecture. It takes too much out of us to fully instantiate at full operational scale every quarter. So at the moment, ASAP Quick Picks are doing double duty as the temporal substitute. The funded architecture is in the gestating form. The substitute is what is actually running today. How does the same video change meaning depending on which playlist it enters? Honestly, the meaning of the video does not change. What changes is its value. Because a single video can route into multiple playlists at the same time, a video can go back into an ASAP quick pick, into a category-specific quick pick, into a Jungian quick pick, into a typology quick pick, into a derivative playlist all at once. That is hypergraph threading. The video does not change, its threading does. Its frame of reference multiply. Its frames of reference multiply. The video becomes a cross-threaded node inside a hypergraph. Disparate parts of the cybernetic ecology that look like they only connect through edges and vertices, actually connecting through hyperedges. A playlist is one of those hyperedges. Hold on to that. We're coming back to it. As you can see on your screen, you're watching a natural science quick pick, natural science 1. Now, question number 2. How does playlist theory change the consumer's relationship to the feed? How does it change what it feels like to move through the YouTube home screen, the subscription box, search results, the recommendation surface? Before playlist theory, a relevant video creates interruption pressure. You are watching something, you are scrolling, maybe you are mowing the grass with the feed in your headphones. A relevant video surfaces, and now you have a problem. Do you click it now? Do you lose your place in whatever you're watching already, wherever you were doing? Do you trust the algorithm to show it again? Do not. Not unless it was targeted to you in the first five videos on the home screen. Past 5 to 15, you can forget it. Outside that contextual window, the home feed saturates every 45 to 90 minutes and refuses to refresh until the buffer clears. Do you throw it into watch later and hope you remember why? Do you ignore it and let it disappear, telling yourself if it's worth it, it will come back? That last move, that is the move of a passive content consumer. That is someone expecting the algorithm to shape their reality and super serve them content. We do not allow that to happen. We are active. We remember titles. We remember thumbnails. We subscribe deliberately to creators producing relevant work. We save the video to an instantiated playlist or to an ASAP quick pick so we can track that thread across time. After playlist theory, the decision becomes clean. If it's urgent, it goes to ASAP. If it belongs to a domain, it goes to a category-specific playlist. If it belongs to the record of the moment, it goes to a temporal playlist. If it belongs to a future inquiry, it may become a search term, a note, a future playlist, or a hypergraph edge. That last one, that is where I want you to live for a second, because that is the move that elevates a playlist into a search term. That is how you go from a single piece of content to a generative inquiry that ramifies through the entire hypergraph. Playlist theory teaches you how to search. Playlist theory teaches you how a video becomes a question, and that gives us the line. The feed stops being only a place where content happens to me, and it becomes a surface I can process. So what does it actually mean to process a feed instead of merely scrolling it? Processing a feed means processing titles and thumbnails. It means knowing where you are inside the cybernetic ecology at any moment. It means stipulating, I am a content consumer. I'm not merely scrolling. Every title and thumbnail is going into a category, unconsciously or consciously, because I have decided whether this video is going into a playlist or not, right? Because I have to decide whether this video is going into a playlist or not. You are not going to add every video to a playlist unless your algorithm is dialed in to an unnatural level. You will still swipe refresh the home feed because the home feed is not giving you what you want, you need in terms of, is not giving you what you need in absolute relation to every single title and every single thumbnail. But what playlist theory offers you is a way to contextualize your experiences over time. You can tweak the algorithm by clicking the 3 dots and tapping Not Interested. You can refresh the home feed. On mobile, you can scroll all the way down to the bottom of the home screen and click Not Interested. On mobile, you can scroll upwards as you work your way back to the top, conditioning the algorithm by negation. How does playlist theory reduce the fear of missing content? It reduces it because once you have pre-established buckets, you know this video goes here. And I remember to put it here for this reason. So that 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I can recover where this is, why this is, and what it means to me at that moment as a reflection of my lived experience. Compare that to the alternative. A huge, undifferentiated bucket that means nothing. No way to navigate the cybernetic ecology, no way to navigate the YouTube user interface itself. So playlist theory reduces the fear of missing content because you are creating recoverable buckets. And once it begins with a title, you are laying down cognitive superstructure, not just conscious competence, actual neural pathways. Your mind starts unconsciously asking, first and foremost, is this video worth saving into a playlist? That is the first part of endgame in playlist theory. That superstructure inside your psyche, those neural pathways, that conscious competence trickling outward into you becoming an active content consumer instead of a passive one. How does playlist theory protect the current video I'm already watching? More than protecting it, it allows you to reallocate your time toward the content you are primarily watching. Unless you stumble onto something more compelling, in which case you can save it to a playlist, watch the new video, and come back later. So it's less about protecting the current video and more about protecting future videos, future inquiries that you would otherwise lose. How does it prevent the server refresh problem from controlling the session? The server refresh problem is a two-front problem. First front, if you are scrolling this home feed on mobile and click into a video, into a thumbnail, into a channel page, into a playlist architecture, when you come back to the home screen, it can time out and reset to a default state. You lose the feed you were processing. Second front, every 45 minutes or so, the entire home screen gets refreshed and repopulated with new titles and thumbnails. So if you are working through the home feed, scrolling 30% down, 60%, 80% down, and are clicking into channels, adding videos to playlists, navigating away, you might get refreshed mid-session and lose access to everything the home screen was feeding you. The takeaway is operational. Save aggressively. Do not assume the home feed will preserve itself. Do not trust the algorithm to bring it back. The server refresh problem can control your session if you let it. Playlist theory is what stops it from doing so. Listen, how does playlist theory change the emotional tone of high volume consumption? It changes it because what would otherwise look like overconsumption, what would feel like overcontextualization, becomes an archive, a way to document your experience as a consumer. Because otherwise, what is high volume consumption for? Just internal intake, with no way to ever externalize why you have consumed what you have consumed? Playlist theory creates a texture, an indented texture, a way to perform meta-reflexive contextualization on your own consumption, and that transforms the emotional tone. Without it, high-volume consumption becomes muddied at the level of perception, stifled at the level of agency, eventually stenciled into pure habituation. With playlist theory, you can change how you relate to the feed. You can lay down neural connections. You can transform what high volume consumption feels like, because content consumers at scale have no outlet. They can only externalize their consumption by becoming creators. But the moment you become a creator, you have neglected your consumer identity. Content curation is the path that lets you Package the identity of being a content consumer while allowing the emotional tone of high volume consumption to be referenced and spoken about. So this is really about communication. It's about emotional expression for content consumers who, until now, had no medium for expression. Last sub-question. Does playlist theory make consumption slower, or does it make high-speed consumption more deliberate? At the start, slower, definitely slower. You are itemizing titles and thumbnails. You are scanning. You are asking yourself, what category does this belong to? What does it mean to me? What does it mean to someone else if I'm curating for them? That takes friction. That takes time. But the friction accretes. Over time, the friction sharpens you into faster pattern recognition. You start scanning titles and thumbnails at a higher fidelity. You can tell instantly whether something is clickbait, whether it's just bait, whether the thumbnail itself has already given you everything you needed without watching the video. High-speed consumption becomes deliberate, not passive. The slowness was the price of admission. The pattern recognition is what you bought with it. So playlist theory makes consumption slower at baseline, and over time, it makes high-speed consumption more deliberate. Question number 3. How does the velocity question lead toward the curator role? How does serving the velocity problem for myself begin to point towards curation as a rule? At first, playlist theory is personal. It helps me manage my own consumption. It helps me preserve my own context. It helps me organize my consume digest. It is private information for a private problem, but eventually the structure becomes legible enough that it can become useful to someone else. That is the bridge from CC1B to CC3. The learner begins to understand the method behind the playlist architecture. The curator emerges when that method starts to externalize. When the consumer wants to organize, preserve, publish, explain, or share the content they consume in a way that helps others traverse the same terrain. When does private organization become public value? The literal moment you change a playlist from unlisted to public. The moment you publish that playlist link in a community post or drop it into a video description. The moment a hypergraph edge connects your private structure to an external traverser, even if it's sheltered through unlisted subterfuge, what we call a dark forest, the technique of using unlisted playlists and unlisted videos to communicate a deeper signal and retain audiences. Even there, the moment a degree of separation links your structure to an external public, that private organization becomes public value. When does a playlist become useful to someone other than the person who made it? When they can navigate it with ease, consume the content you have curated, and find that it brings value to their life. That is the problem we are attempting to solve as we develop playlist techniques, taxonomies, tactics, because we want people to be able to consume the content we curate on Mr. POLIK 890. The analytics, you are measuring it. Playlist starts, playlist saves, average time in playlist, playlist watch time in hours. When a playlist is public and those numbers move, the structure has crossed over. People might be consuming just titles and thumbnails, spending all their time inside the playlist on tablet or desktop, reading the curation itself. They might be watching individual videos in sequence or out of order. They might be creating their own playlist derived from yours, organizing their own consume digests off your structure. That is a shadow analytic we do not have access to, but it is happening. What does the playlist curator provide that the algorithm cannot? Human touch. Specifically, the human touch of someone who has been a content consumer first. The YouTube algorithm is impersonal data operationalization. It cannot give you curator's content history. It cannot give you my over 70,000 hours of YouTube consumption. It cannot give you my nearly 1,400 subscriptions. It cannot discriminate between content in the way that is outside of your subscription feed, outside of your filter bubble. It cannot give you my curatorial instinct, the trained capacity to scan titles and thumbnails for the highest quality content. It cannot give you the intent behind why I consume what I consume or how I am packaging that consumption into a transmissible consume digest over time. That is what the curator provides that the algorithm structurally cannot. Why is the curator not simply a creator? Because there is a middle way in the creator economy. The curator is a content consumer first. They consume content and they package that consumption, but not in the form of a video, in the form of a playlist. If the curator's primary output were a video, then their hyperedge would be recognized inside the cybernetic ecology as a video, a vertex, an edge. Familiar shapes, graph theoretic objects we already know how to read, but the curator's primary output is a playlist, and a playlist is neither a vertex nor an edge. A playlist is a hyperedge. Playlist technique comes first. Playlist technique is what is most bounded, most orienting, most useful. Why does the curator emerge from the consumer field rather than the creator field? Because the consumer is the emergence layer. You have to understand consumption deeply enough to want to package that consumption in a way that is digestible for others. That is a love of consumption more than anything else. And that love of consumption gets translated into a packageable form that not only works internally for me, but exists externally for others to identify with and traverse. So the curator emerges from the consumer field rather than the creator field because of that lived journey itself. You reach a point where you want to project your consumption habits outward to the cybernetic ecology using the technique of playlists rather than the technique of single videos. What does the third pillar solve that creator and consumer language cannot? The hypergraph. That is what it solves. Is a playlist an edge? Is a playlist a vertex? Neither. A playlist is a hyperedge, and graph theory was built on a simple graph theory was built on simple edges and simple vertices. We have evolved past that. We now think relationally through hypergraphs, graph structures where a single connection can bind many points at once. The cybernetic ecology contains hyperedges. The hypergraph contains hyperedges, right? The cybernetic ecology contains hyperedges. The hypergraph contains hyperedges. That is the power of as an aggregator. We are bringing natural science technique and packaging it in a way that the average content consumer can understand and internalize. We are saying no, content curators deserve to be the third pillar because the hypergraph does not only contain edges and vertices, it contains hyperedges. That is what the third pillar solves, that content creators and content consumer language cannot. And here's the practical consequence. Because there has never been a way to monetize content consumption except by leaving it, by becoming a creator, the moment you become a creator, you stop being a consumer. The identity is gone. The consumer who actually understood the cybernetic ecology disappears into a creator who now has to perform. The third pillar refuses that trade. It says, no, we can package the identity of being a content consumer, the love of consumption, the trained instinct, the durable relation to the archive. We can transmit it, we can monetize it, we can make it a role. That is what as an aggregator is doing. That is what the third pillar exists to install. So here is segment 2 landing. The velocity question begins as a consumer problem. There is too much content moving too quickly with too much potential value, and the platform does not preserve enough context for the person trying to make sense of it. Playlist theory answers that question first as infrastructure. But then, once that infrastructure becomes legible, repeatable, and useful to others, it becomes something more than personal organization. It becomes curation. And that is the reason the third pillar has to exist. End of segment 2. If you've enjoyed this content, add it to a playlist. If you've made it all the way to the end, thank you. And for going back into our archive to see some of our original content when we were trying to explain playlist theory, the different market segmentation we have when speaking to content, different types of content consumers, CC1B to CC0 to CC3. On your screen now is the first iteration of our natural science quick pick. Natural Science 1. Some of our earliest quick picks in the first iteration. This is a quick pick with over 400 videos, 450 to be exact. It contains natural science culture commentary involving medicine, involving health, involving science in general, different types of artifacts related to natural science. I hope you've enjoyed this playlist, and I hope you've enjoyed my segment 2. Thank you.